Have you ever felt that familiar spine-tingling sensation when you know you're being watched? Well, I have too. Please stay tuned in this episode if you want to hear more. In part 27A, you heard about me leaving Jim and heading west to California to Becca's house in the San Francisco Bay Area. In this episode, part 27B, you're going to hear an interesting little incident that happened shortly after I got there. Hi, I'm Sarah Wilder, and welcome to Surviving the Man I Married. So I rolled into Becca's driveway at about 12 hours after I left Utah, same day. It was July 7th. And as usual, Becca is the consummate host. Everyone was asleep. I quietly did the code, entered the code into the door. Me and the dogs got into the house and settled into our guest bedroom on the main floor. I had the bathroom right next to my room. And as usual, my room was outfitted for with all the comforts of home. There was a new robe, brand new slippers, an extra blanket, hand lotion, tissue, you name it. She knew me inside and out, and that room was ready. It was an impromptu evacuation, and it took my daughters by surprise, especially Rachel and Becca, who the three of us were extremely close, and they were the ones that were aware of most of the doings between Jim and I. Becca and Rachel and I had kind of thought out a plan that would be a little bit later, not even in July, really. I wanted to make it through a couple of infusions. But life didn't work out that way, and we rolled with it. So, right on schedule, Becca and her family left for a 15-day vacation to the East Coast that had been planned for a very long time. And that's one reason why my visit took them by surprise. But it also was beneficial because instead of sending their dog to board with someone they really didn't know well and someone else to watch their parakeet, I was the Granny Poppins, Granny Doolittle, and I watched my two dogs, Becca's dog, and their parakeet. And it was a perfect match. We all had a wonderful time. I spent most of my days of that 15-day hiatus. I was all alone, of course, which was great. And I was outside. They had a beautiful backyard, like a sanctuary of an outdoor living space. And that's where I hung out. I took my meals out there. I smoked a ton of weed. And let me tell you, the stress of this whole thing, I was going through 3 grams a day. It was nuts. And I felt safe. Becca and her husband Alex had cameras inside the house and outside. And for that reason, I did feel safe. I even told them, please check in on me now and then, okay? I don't know what's going to happen. You know, Jim had been a cop for 27 years in California. He knew a lot of people. I don't know. But I say that because I'm prefacing a couple of little small incidents that happened while I was there that made me think, I wondered, he knew I would head to Becca's, I always did, and he knew their address. He'd just been there. He had just been there a month earlier. So I worried when one night, very late, in fact, there were two incidences like this, very late at night, when I'm sitting out on their side patio. They had a huge backyard and a big patio, and I sat on the side patio because there was a little light there, and it was next to the door to go into the garage. There was a doggy door, and right on the other side of me was a gate that led to the front yard. So it's about 1 in the morning. It's nice and warm. It's July in Northern California. I'm having a smoke, and I'm closing my eyes, leaning back in the lawn chair, and the air is very still, very still. It's quiet. You could hear a pin drop, and I hear a whistle. Now I know this is not any kind of a bird or an animal whistle. There's not a sound out, and it's a human whistle. It's the kind that you hear when someone is signaling another person. Well, guess what? I hear a second whistle, and it's very, very close. It's actually probably out in front of the property next door. It's very close to the gate that goes to the front yard. I don't need to hear a third whistle. I grab my stuff. I hightail it into the garage and into the house. I lock the doggy doors, and me and the dogs hunker down in the house. My heart was racing. I don't know if it was the weed making me paranoid, but I heard what I heard, and I reacted accordingly. I locked everything down and I went to bed. Okay, so at that incident, I felt chills. I felt goosebumps and chills all over my body, starting with the back of my neck, all over my scalp. And that's one of the reasons I reacted. It was like primal instinct. But a week later, it happened again around the same time of night. I heard a whistle. I heard one in response. But the funny thing was this time, because I'm very aware of my body, I'm very aware of my energy, and I'm extremely intuitive. If you watch my videos, you already know this. This time, I immediately, upon hearing the first whistle, I felt like a bubble of silence surround me, almost like everything else was muffled and I was surrounded by a bubble. I did the same thing though. I grabbed the dogs, my drinks, extinguished my joint, ran in the house, and hunkered down and stayed inside. So the family, once the family returned, so this was once the family returned about 4 days later, I never again heard those whistles. It was only while I was there alone. So those are my two weird, creepy little experiences while I was alone in the house. But something else happened while I was alone at Becca's property. Just 3 days after I got there, I texted psychic medium Peter for an emergency reading. I did tell him I had left Jim for good and I was relocated to California to Becca's house, but I didn't give him any more updates than that. I knew he would be happy to hear it, and I gave him that context because it was an emergency, and normally his appointments are scheduled weeks out. Well, guess what? I got one for just 2 days later. So there's a reading coming up. I'm excited to tell this to you. It had been over 2 years since Peter and I had had a session together. I was very excited. The anticipation was just oozing out of me. I didn't know what to expect because all that had gone on since Peter and I last met. Good, terrible, even worse. So much stuff had happened. But you know what? I knew once Peter brought through my mom and my dad in the reading, they would spiritually hold my hands through it. I could handle anything he was going to say, and I was ready for it. Please stay tuned for the next part of my series, Surviving the Man I Married, part 28, where I tell you a reading with Peter. And it's long, it's at least 4 parts and maybe 5.